She was 17, and that garden, lush and quiet behind a tall iron gate, was the only place in the world where no one told her she didn't belong. She'd wandered through town that night, belly heavy, fear heavier. The contractions had started just after midnight, under the flickering streetlight behind the gas station. No money, no family, no one left to call. Some girls would have run to a hospital, but not her. She'd been turned away too many times already, looked at like a mistake, like trash. She couldn't bear another door closed in her face, so she slipped through the gate of a house she didn't know. A mansion, really. One of those homes with too many windows and not enough light. The garden was wild and overgrown, and somehow it welcomed her. The stone bench was cold. The ivy-covered wall gave her something to lean on, and in the soft earth beneath the roses, her water broke. It was there, in the garden of a stranger's house, under a sky that didn't judge, that a child was born. No nurses, no bright lights, just a girl who had never been mothered, becoming a mother herself. The baby's cry was small and startled. So was hers. She wrapped him in the only sweater she had, blood still on her legs, gravel in her knees, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold him. But she did. And inside that enormous house, behind shuttered windows, someone had been watching. A man who didn't sleep. A man with ghosts of his own. He was 52, a billionaire in name only now. Once called the Golden Orphan by the press. Adopted young, raised with money but never love. Now he lived alone. No wife, no children. Just a garden he hadn't walked through in years. And silence so thick it pressed against the walls. But that night, the silence broke. He saw her from the balcony. Not the birth itself, but the aftermath. Her curled around something small, something that wouldn't stop crying. He should have called someone. Security, police, anyone. Instead he watched, because something about the way she held that baby, it shook something loose in him he didn't know was still there. If you've ever felt like the world gave up on someone too soon, then come sit a while, sugar. This story's about broken beginnings, quiet kindness, and the garden where two strangers found a reason to keep breathing. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Not after what her body had just done. Not with the baby squirming against her chest, rooting for a breast that hadn't yet learned how to feed. The garden was cold, dew forming on the grass like the world was starting over. But she wasn't sure she could. The sweater barely covered the baby's legs. He made little mewling sounds now, like a kitten. She whispered to him through chattering teeth, "It's okay. I got you, I got you." She didn't even know what time it was, just that the pain hadn't stopped, only changed. Her belly was empty now, but her arms were full. And her heart, Lord, her heart was tearing in ways she didn't have words for. She'd left the group home a week ago, the last place that would take her. Too many rules, too many eyes, too many questions she didn't want to answer. The father? Gone before the second line on the test turned pink. Her mum? Hadn't called since last Christmas. She'd been a motherless daughter long before she became a mother herself. And now she was here, in someone's backyard, with nothing but a baby and a name she hadn't said out loud in days. Callie, she whispered to herself, like trying to remember she was still a person. And then the door creaked open. Not the front one, the back, just off the patio. She froze, clutching the baby tighter, ready to run, though she had nowhere to go. But the man didn't shout, didn't ask what she was doing there. He just stepped down onto the grass, careful, slow, like someone approaching a wounded animal. He had silver in his beard and dark circles under his eyes. His clothes looked expensive but slept in, worn, like him. His bare feet padded silently toward her. She didn't speak, didn't dare. He looked at her for a long time before he said anything. Not at her face, but at the bundle in her arms. "You had him here?" he asked softly. She nodded barely. He took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "You need help." Her body tensed. She'd heard that before. From social workers, from cops, always followed by someone taking something from her. But he didn't move closer, didn't reach for the baby. He just looked at her like she was a puzzle he wasn't sure how to hold. "I've got a guest house, no cameras. No one but me lives here. You can stay, for now." She blinked. He didn't even ask her name. and something in her wanted to believe him. But when she followed him, limping, bleeding, scared, with her newborn in her arms, she had no idea what lay beyond that guest house door. Because waiting on the kitchen table was a photograph he hadn't touched in years, a woman with her same eyes, and he'd been dreaming about her the night Callie gave birth, in his garden. The guest house smelled like old lemons and linen spray. It was small, one room, a bathroom, a sink that dripped like a heartbeat. But to Callie, it felt like a castle, a warm one. He didn't say much as he opened the door, just nodded toward the couch. "Blankets are in there," he said, pointing to a wooden chest. "Fridge has some soup. Take what you need." She stepped in slow, careful not to jostle the baby. The man lingered at the threshold for a moment, like he was waiting for something. Then he turned and left, closing the door with a click that was softer than she expected. Callie stood there, afraid to exhale. The baby whimpered. She moved to the couch and sat down with a wince. Her body ached everywhere. But the couch was soft, and the blanket smelled like cedar and something else, something that made her eyes sting. She fed the baby the best she could, with a bottle she hadn't been able to rinse properly since the bus station. He was so small, so hungry. She watched him drink and thought about how she'd almost named him River. But then, in the garden, it just came to her. Eli, short, gentle, like the way he sighed in his sleep. She whispered it into the dark. "Eli, you're okay now." Across the yard, in the main house, he couldn't sleep either. His name was Thomas Gray. If you'd searched the business magazines from 20 years ago, you'd have found him on every other page. A boy wonder turned tech king. Then a sudden retreat from the world, after the plane crash that took his wife and unborn daughter. They said he disappeared. But really, he just stopped being seen. Until tonight. Because when he looked into that girl's face, crouched in the dirt, clutching her newborn, it hit him like thunder. She looked like her. Not exactly, but enough. The same slope of the nose, the same shadow in the eyes. He almost said her name out loud. He went to the guest room in the main house, opened the drawer he hadn't opened in years, pulled out the photograph he kept tucked inside an old book of poems, his wife, Emily, and the baby bump she never got to meet. He stared at it for a long time, then turned it face down on the nightstand. He didn't know who that girl was in the guest house, but something about her being there felt like the earth tilting back into place, and down the hall, the baby cried again. Thomas closed his eyes, his hand still resting on the back of the photograph. In that moment, he didn't know that Callie had seen it, that she'd wandered into the main house when he stepped outside to take a call, that she'd followed the sound of music, a faint old record playing from the office. She didn't touch anything, just looked, quiet, almost reverent. And when she saw the photograph on the table, she stopped breathing, because the woman in the picture, Emily, had the same necklace Callie's mother used to wear, the same one Callie found in a drawer the day her mom vanished. And just like that, the stranger who took her in might not have been a stranger at all. She didn't mean to look through his things. Callie had been raised with just enough rules to know what lines not to cross. But something about that house, so big, so quiet, it made her feel like a whisper inside a cathedral. And when she heard the music, soft and strange, she followed it, not because she was curious, because she was drawn. There were pictures on the shelves, most covered in dust, a few so faded she had to blink twice to make out the faces. But one sat in the center, clean and deliberate, a frame with dark wood and a thin border of gold. It was the woman, the one from the photograph in the guest room. And the necklace, Callie would have recognized it anywhere. She used to hold it as a child, press the little gold charm between her fingers while her mom brushed her hair or told bedtime stories. Her mom never said where it came from, just that it had been a gift once, a long time ago. But Callie remembered how tightly she held it when things got hard, how, on the day she left for good, she left the necklace behind, like it hurt too much to carry anymore. And now here it was, in a photograph, around the neck of a stranger's dead wife. Callie felt like the floor had dropped beneath her. She heard the front door close, Thomas coming back in, and she stepped away from the photo like it had burned her. She ran back across the yard, heart thudding, pulled Eli into her arms and rocked him, like he was the only thing keeping her tethered to the ground. She didn't sleep that night, and neither did he. The next morning she tried to act normal, whatever that meant. She made toast in the guest house toaster, washed the baby in the sink with careful hands, let the morning light warm the floor, pretended she didn't feel like her past had just cracked open. Thomas knocked once before entering. "I brought formula. The good kind." She took it from him with a nod. "You sleep?" "A little," she lied. He didn't press, just looked at the baby, who blinked up at him like he already knew things. "He's got sharp eyes," Thomas said. "Yeah, like his dad," she muttered, and then bit her lip. Regret washed over her. He raised a brow. "You don't have to tell me anything, you know." Callie met his gaze for a second, and for the first time she asked him something. "That woman, in the photo, was she your wife?" He stilled, nodded once. "She was." Callie didn't know what made her say it. Maybe it was the ache of not knowing, or maybe it was the baby's heartbeat against her chest, reminding her she didn't have time for fear anymore. "My mom had that necklace once." His face changed, like someone had pulled the air from the room. He sat down slowly, as if the weight of her words was too much to stand with. "What was her name?" he asked. And when Callie said it, barely above a whisper, Thomas Gray dropped his glass, because the name Callie spoke was the name of the baby his wife lost, the one no one ever found. He didn't pick up the glass right away, just stared at the pieces, scattered like little truths across the floor. Callie stood frozen, Eli pressing his face into her collarbone, unaware that the world had just tilted. Thomas tried to speak, but the words clung to his throat like molasses. "You said your mother's name was Marianne," Callie repeated. "Marianne Hallow." The name hung in the room like incense, soft, lingering, sacred. He hadn't heard it in 20 years. Marianne had been a teenager too, when Emily, his wife, brought her into the house, not as a guest, as a secret. Emily had found her crying behind the laundromat, pregnant, bruised, brought her home like a stray she couldn't leave behind. Marianne never told them who the father was, just begged not to go back. Thomas didn't understand it back then. He thought Emily was being reckless, but something in Marianne, something fragile and fiery, made Emily feel like she had a sister, a second self, and for a little while their house felt fuller, until the night Emily went into labor, and the car never made it to the hospital. Only Thomas survived the crash, Emily and the baby, gone. And Marianne? She disappeared the next day, took nothing, left no note, just vanished, like a ghost ashamed to haunt. He'd spent years wondering why, hating her, missing her, never knowing if she was dead or alive. And now this girl was standing in his guest house, holding a baby in her arms, saying Marianne was my mother. He looked up at Callie, not with suspicion, not with fear, but with something more fragile, hope. "Where did she go?" he asked, voice breaking. "After she left?" Callie shook her head. "She didn't talk about the past. She moved around a lot, never stayed in one place, said roots got people hurt." He felt that in his bones. "I didn't know about you," she said quietly. "I didn't know there was a man connected to all of it." "There wasn't," he whispered. "Not really. She left before I could ask her to stay." Callie sat down, slowly, still holding Eli. She looked at the floor. "I think she loved my dad, but he didn't love her back. Not enough. Thomas didn't ask who he was. He could guess. There were always men like that, in every chapter of every woman's story. "I'm sorry," he said, not sure what part he was apologizing for. She smiled, a sad little thing. "Me too." They sat in silence, the kind that lets wounds breathe. Then Eli let out a hiccup, and both of them laughed. Soft, surprised laughter, like something had cracked and sunlight had finally found its way through. Callie looked at him, really looked at him. "Why did you let me stay?" she asked. "You didn't know me." Thomas looked at the baby. "I think I did." And just like that, the word family started to stretch. It didn't break this time, but the past has long arms. And that night, a letter arrived in the mailbox. No return address, just her mother's handwriting. Inside was a key and a confession. The envelope was soft at the edges, yellowed like something carried too long in a coat pocket. The handwriting stopped Thomas cold. He'd know it anywhere. Curved, careful, like someone who learned to write by watching others. It was Marianne's. Callie watched him open it, not breathing. Inside, a folded letter and a key on a thin red string. He didn't read it aloud, just stared at the page for a long time, the words pulling him down, line by line. Callie finally spoke. "What does it say?" He cleared his throat, read slowly, quietly. Not like a man reading a letter, but like a man digging up a grave. "Dear Thomas, if this ever finds you, I hope you're still kind, still patient, still waiting with that silence you wore like armor. I left because I couldn't breathe, not after losing her. Emily was more than a friend to me. She was safety, and I ruined it by surviving. But I didn't just run away. I ran because I was pregnant again. I don't know if you'll believe me. I barely believed it myself. I was in love, stupidly, hopelessly. And he left when he found out, said I was damaged. I never even told him about Emily, about the baby I lost before. But I couldn't let Callie grow up in shame. I tried. I really did. I moved her from place to place, hoping no one would ask too many questions. But it cost her everything stable, everything soft. So if she finds you, if by some miracle she knocks on your door or bleeds in your garden, give her what I couldn't." Thomas sat with the letter for a long while, the words sinking in like rain through dry soil. Callie traced the red string on the key. "She wanted me to find you," she whispered. He nodded. The silence stretched again, this time not empty, but full. Thomas looked at her, eyes soft. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Not your story, not your time." Callie shook her head. "I think maybe we owe each other a little grace." Outside, the sky was beginning to rain, soft, steady drops. Callie got up and walked toward the door. She stood there, Eli warm in her arms, staring into the gray. Then she turned back. "I want to know her," she said. "Really know her. Not just the running, not just the hard parts." He stood, walked to a drawer, pulled out a box with an old scarf wrapped around it. Inside were photos, letters, Emily's old journals, and Marianne's first drawing of the nursery they never built. "I kept everything," he said quietly, "even when it hurt." Callie reached out, tentative at first, but her fingers were steady. She didn't know it yet, but that box would be the beginning of her healing, not because it answered every question, but because it made her feel chosen. That night she sat by the window with Eli asleep on her chest, reading her mother's words, and in the quiet, she smiled. But in the corner of the box was something she hadn't noticed, a photo of her mother, and a man standing next to her that Callie didn't recognize, not Thomas, and not a stranger either, because on the back of the photo, in soft pencil, it said, "Summer, me and Jack, before everything changed." Callie turned the photograph over in her hands, the way someone might handle an old heirloom, gently, like it might break if held too tight. The woman in the picture was unmistakably her mother, Marianne, years younger, her smile small but sincere. Her hair was longer, sun-lightened at the edges, and the man beside her, he had a quiet handsomeness, like someone who never asked to be seen but was anyway. Tall, lean, a watch on his left wrist, leather-banded and worn. His hand rested on Marianne's shoulder in a way that said they weren't just strangers sharing a frame. There was a warmth between them, an ease, but also something held back, something unsaid. And the words scrawled on the back of the photo, whispered like a riddle. "Summer, me and Jack, before everything changed." Callie didn't recognize the man, and yet something about him felt close, like a name she used to know. She looked up. Thomas was across the room, sitting in his armchair, the letter from Marianne folded back into its envelope. "Do you know him?" she asked. He leaned forward, squinting at the photo, then froze. "Jack." His voice dropped lower, heavy. "Jack Holloway." Callie blinked. "You know him." "I knew of him. He worked for the company once, long time ago. Brilliant with numbers, cold as stone." There was something else in Thomas's voice, something sharp at the edges. "He and Marianne?" Callie let the question hang. Thomas didn't answer right away. "I never knew," he finally said. "Emily suspected. Said Marianne looked at him like someone who hoped too much." Callie ran her thumb along the edge of the photo. "Do you know where he is?" Thomas gave her a long look. "You sure you want to?" She hesitated. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I think I need to." She folded the photo and slid it into her back pocket, beside the key. Her heart was thudding again. The way it had the night she gave birth, fast, searching, scared. Because the truth wasn't just about who Jack was, it was about who she was, and what Eli might carry in his blood. That night, after she fed the baby and rocked him to sleep, she stood outside in the garden, the same spot where she'd labored alone. Only now, the bench was dry, the air was soft, and the stars above blinked without judgment. Thomas joined her, his coffee in hand. They didn't talk, just stood there, two people bound not by blood, but by memory. She looked at him. "You really kept all of it?" He nodded. "Even the hard parts." Callie took a deep breath. "I think I want to find him." Thomas didn't flinch. "I'll help." And in that quiet agreement, something passed between them. Not quite father and daughter, not quite strangers either. Something gentler, like chosen family. But in a town 3 hours away, in a second-story apartment above an auto shop, a man named Jack Holloway poured himself a drink and stared at a name on his voicemail. Callie Hallow. Jack stared at the screen like it had teeth. The name wasn't common. It wasn't like Emily or Sarah or something easy to forget. It was Callie, and paired with Hallow, it echoed. He hadn't heard the name in 17 years, not since that summer. Not since the woman with the warm eyes and quiet sadness left without a word, taking his only chance at redemption with her. He'd looked for her once, right after Emily's funeral, right after he learned what happened. He'd driven all the way to the coast, checked shelters, called old contacts, found a place she'd been, a room she'd rented under a fake name. But she was always 2 steps ahead. Or maybe she didn't want to be found. Jack had made peace with that, or so he thought. But now, this name, on his voicemail, Callie Hallow. He played the message, just a few seconds long. "Hi, I'm not sure if you're the Jack Holloway who knew Marianne Hallow years ago. But if you are, I think you might be my father." His hands shook. Not from fear, from the weight of something long buried clawing its way back up. He didn't call back that night. He couldn't. Instead, he sat at his small kitchen table, pulled out the old Polaroid he kept hidden beneath a stack of unpaid bills, and stared at her. Marianne. Her eyes hadn't changed in his memory, but now they lived in someone else. The next morning, Callie waited by the phone. She hadn't told Thomas she'd made the call. It felt too fragile to say out loud. Eli was asleep in the sling against her chest. His tiny breath steadied her. The phone rang once, twice, then silence. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. "Hello?" There was a long pause, and then his voice. Deep, slow, careful. "Callie?" She closed her eyes. "Yes." Another pause. I think you better come." And just like that, the question she'd carried since childhood, who was my father, had a voice full of sorrow, and maybe, just maybe, a second chance. But when she arrived at his apartment 2 days later, she found more than she expected. Because Jack Holloway wasn't alone. He had a daughter, one she raised, one with a perfect house, perfect job, perfect life. And when that woman opened the door, saw Callie holding a baby on her hip, she didn't smile. She narrowed her eyes and said, "You must be the mistake." She hadn't expected balloons, or the smell of cake fresh out the oven. But Callie didn't expect that either. The woman who opened the door was beautiful, but in a way that left no room for softness. Straight hair, perfect blouse, not a wrinkle on her face, and her eyes, cold, measuring. She looked Callie over once, then let her gaze settle on the baby. "You must be the mistake." Callie said nothing. She just pulled Eli closer, like a shield. The woman tilted her head. "You're my father's daughter?" Callie took a breath. "So it seems." The woman gave a sharp, humorless laugh. "He said someone might show up. I just didn't think she'd come with a souvenir." Before Callie could speak, another voice echoed from down the hall. "Jenna." It was low, familiar, quiet. Jack. He appeared behind the woman, a little older than the photo, but unmistakable. And when he saw Callie standing there, her baby in her arms, fear behind her eyes, he stopped. Jenna looked over her shoulder. "She's here. I told you to let me answer the door." Jack stepped past her. His face softened as he looked at Callie. Not too close, not too far. Like a man trying not to break something already cracked. Callie swallowed. "This is Eli." Jack looked at the baby, something unreadable crossing his face. "He looks like you." Callie gave the smallest nod. I don't even know where to start. Jack nodded too. Me neither. Behind them, Jenna huffed. Maybe with a paternity test. Jenna. She raised her hands and walked off, heels clicking against the tile. Jack turned back to Callie. There was a long pause between them. Then, would you like to come in? She hesitated, then crossed the threshold. One slow step into the unknown. The house was neat. Too neat. Like nobody really lived there. Frames on the walls, graduation photos, office awards, European cities. But no warmth, no fingerprints. Nothing that felt like breath. In the kitchen, Jack put water on for tea. Callie sat down, Eli asleep against her chest. She didn't know, Jack said quietly. About your mother. Or you. Callie nodded. My mom told me he left. Jack looked down. I did. I was afraid I'd ruin everything. And now? He looked up. Now I'm trying not to ruin this. The words lingered in the air. Then Eli stirred. His face flushed, breathing fast. Callie shifted, trying to soothe him. But something was wrong. His head lolled. His body felt hot, heavy. Eli! Her voice cracked. Eli, baby! Wake up! Jack stood instantly. Callie was already on her feet, panic rising. He's burning up, he's not responding. Jack grabbed his keys. Come on, we're going now. Jenna appeared again as they reached the door. But she didn't say a word this time. She just watched as her father ran out into the cold with a girl he barely knew and a baby he suddenly couldn't imagine losing. The hospital was 15 minutes away, but to Callie, it felt like forever. Eli was burning up. His breathing was shallow, like he was pulling air through a straw. His face was red, his body limp, and Callie was unraveling by the second. Jack drove like a man who didn't care about speed limits, only about time. Time he didn't want to lose again. In the back seat, Callie held Eli and whispered over and over, Stay with me, baby, please, just stay. When they arrived, she burst through the ER doors, barefoot, pale, clutching the baby like he was all that remained of the world. Nurses moved quickly. A doctor came. Someone took Eli. Someone else asked questions. And then she was alone, in a cold plastic chair, arms empty, chest aching. Jack sat beside her, silent. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. Her voice came out in a whisper. I can't lose him. He's all I have. Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know, he said. That's why I'm staying right here. She looked down at her trembling hands. I don't even know how to pray anymore. You don't have to, he said. You're already loving him. That's enough. Time passed differently after that. Slower. Warped. Then finally, a doctor came through the double doors. He's stable now, he said. He has a respiratory infection. We've started treatment. He responded quickly to the meds. Callie let out a cry that was half sob, half breath. They brought her to the room, and there he was. Tiny, bundled, breathing easier. She held him close again, kissed his warm forehead, whispered thank yous into his hair. Jack stood near the doorway, watching. Callie looked over at him. You didn't have to come with me. I did, he said. You just didn't know it yet. A silence grew between them, but it wasn't empty. She looked down at her baby, then back at Jack. I don't know what you want from me, she said. Jack looked at the boy in her arms. I don't want anything. I just want to be here. She nodded, tears drying against her cheeks. Sometimes, that's everything. Back across town, in the neat little house Jack left behind, Jenna stood in her father's study, holding a sealed envelope that had arrived by courier. She tore it open. Inside, a legal letter from a law firm she didn't recognize. Petition for biological heir status. Her chest tightened. She wasn't just being visited. She was being replaced. Jenna stared at the envelope like it had cursed her. The words on the page were simple, professional. But to her, they may as well have screamed. Petition for biological heir status. Filed in Callie's name. Requested by Jack Holloway. Her father. Her only family. She stood alone in his study, the late afternoon light falling across the hardwood floor like ribbons of dust and disbelief. She'd been his everything. His legacy. The one who stayed when his marriage fell apart. The one who checked on him after his surgeries. The one who brought groceries when he forgot to eat. And now, some girl from nowhere, who showed up with a baby and a story, was being given the title Jenna had worn her whole life, daughter. She sat at the desk, read the letter again, the date, the signature, her father's handwriting at the bottom. He hadn't even told her. Rage bubbled up, thick and hot, but underneath it, something worse, fear. Because Jenna had built her entire world on one truth. She was all he had, and now that was no longer true. At the hospital, Callie didn't know anything about the letter. She only knew that Eli's fever was going down, that the nurses were kind, and that, every time she opened her eyes, Jack was still there. He brought her coffee from the machine down the hall. It tasted awful, but it was warm. "I signed some forms," he said quietly. "Made sure you're listed as the primary contact. I didn't want there to be any confusion." Callie looked up. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged. "Because you're his mother, and because I'm trying to do this right. This time." Callie nodded. She looked down at Eli, his tiny chest rising and falling with slow, peaceful breaths. "Do you ever regret not being a father?" she asked. Jack didn't answer right away. Just let the silence fill with the hum of hospital machines. "I regret not trying," he said. "I regret the silence and the pride." Callie didn't press. She just reached for Eli's tiny hand and whispered, "He's not gonna grow up wondering." And Jack, well, he wiped his eyes before she could see. But someone did see, because just outside the hospital room, Jenna stood in the hallway. She had come to speak her piece, to reclaim her place. But what she saw through the glass window, Callie, tired but glowing, Jack, softened in a way Jenna had never witnessed, made her hesitate, and the piece of paper in her purse suddenly felt heavier, like it had come too late. That night, in the quiet of the guest house Thomas had prepared, Callie sat with her baby curled against her side. Jack had dropped them off himself, refused to leave until she was safely inside. "Are you sure you're okay here alone?" he'd asked. Callie had smiled, tired but sure. "It's not alone anymore." Not really. She placed the photo of her mother and Jack on the nightstand. Next to it, the letter from Marianne, and beside that, the key with the red string. Eli stirred. His tiny fingers opened and closed like he was still reaching for something. She kissed his forehead. "You're safe now, baby. You're safe." But just as she turned off the lamp, her phone buzzed. One message, one line, from a number she didn't recognize. "You're not family, and you never will be." The message sat there on her screen, lit up in the dark. No punctuation, no name, just 7 little words. "You're not family, and you never will be." Callie read it once, then again, then let the phone fall face down on the pillow. The old Callie, the one who lived in bus stations and back alleys, who believed every cruel thing said about her, might have cried, might have packed up Eli and disappeared again, like her mother had. But this version, the one who had sat in a hospital room with a man who didn't run, she just lay back and held her son a little closer, because she knew that voice. It wasn't about her. It was about someone afraid to share the light. Still, it hurt. The next morning, she didn't tell Jack about the message, but Thomas knew something had changed. He saw it in the way she moved. Quieter, more careful. They sat at his kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. Eli gurgled in his little carrier on the floor. Thomas poured her tea. "What happened?" Callie hesitated, then showed him the phone. He read the message. His jaw tensed. "Do you know who sent it?" She nodded. "I think so." Thomas stirred his tea, slow. "She's scared," he said. "Not cruel, just scared of being left behind." Callie looked up. "But I didn't take anything from her." "No," Thomas said. "But you reminded her how easy it is to lose something you never knew you were clinging to." Callie let out a shaky breath. "I don't want to fight her. I don't want this to be some war." "Then don't," he said gently. "Love louder. That's the only way to quiet someone else's fear." She didn't know how to do that. Not yet. But later that day, she asked Jack if she could speak to Jenna alone. He was hesitant at first. "She's not ready." "I know," Callie said. "But I am." The coffee shop was halfway between their homes, neutral ground. Jenna arrived late, sunglasses on, expression unreadable. Callie stood to greet her. Jenna sat down without a word. "I got your message," Callie said softly. Jenna took off her glasses. "Then you know where I stand." Callie folded her hands. "I'm not here to take anything," Jenna scoffed. "You already did." "I didn't ask to be born, Jenna. I didn't ask for any of this." "But you're here, aren't you?" Jenna snapped. "You're here. And now he looks at you like you're the answer to every regret he ever had. Callie's voice didn't rise. It deepened. I'm not an answer. I'm a person. A tired, scared, new mother who just wants to feel safe. Jenna went quiet. Callie stood. I'm not asking for your blessing, but I'm not running either. Not this time. She left the cafe with her chin high, her heart pounding. Jenna stayed seated, staring at the untouched cup of coffee between her hands. And for the first time, she wondered if being the only one had cost her something too. 2 weeks later, the guest house smelled like something sweet. Thomas had asked Callie if she liked cinnamon. She'd smiled, said it reminded her of safety, though she couldn't quite explain why. So now, every morning, he made oatmeal the old-fashioned way, with milk and butter and just the right amount of spice. Eli was thriving, laughing more, sleeping in longer stretches. And Callie, well, her eyes weren't so guarded anymore. One evening, Thomas walked into the guest house carrying a small wrapped box. What's this? Callie asked, wiping baby drool from her shirt. He placed it gently on the table. Something I wish someone had given you earlier. She opened it slowly. Inside was a baby book, one of those old cloth-covered ones, with little fabric pockets for locks of hair and hospital bracelets. Callie blinked. I never had one of these. I figured, Thomas said. So maybe we start it now, together. She touched the pages like they might vanish. There was a spot labeled First Family Photo. She laughed, just a little. Well, it's complicated. He smiled. Every good story is. Later that night, there was a knock at the guest house door. She opened it to find Jenna. No pretense this time. Just her, in jeans and a sweater, holding something behind her back. I was going to throw this away, Jenna said. But something stopped me. She handed it over. It was a small gift bag. Inside, a onesie, pale yellow, unused. The tag still hung from the sleeve. It was supposed to be for a baby shower, Jenna said. Mine. Years ago. I lost the baby at 9 weeks. No one even knew I was pregnant. Callie froze. Her voice softened. I'm sorry. Jenna shrugged, but her eyes were glassy. I kept it in a drawer all these years. And when you showed up, with the baby and a name I never heard, I hated you for it. Callie swallowed. I didn't ask for this. I know, Jenna said. But I still felt like I was watching someone live my life. There was a long pause between them. Then Jenna looked at Eli, sleeping nearby, fists curled under his chin. Can I? She asked. Callie nodded. Jenna stepped in, crossed the room slowly, bent down, brushed a fingertip across Eli's tiny hand. He's beautiful, she whispered. Callie watched her, not with suspicion, but with something else. Hope. That night, Callie added the onesie to the baby book, pressed it between the pages with care. Because sometimes grace is what we pass forward from the love we almost didn't know how to give. But as the clock ticked past midnight, she got another letter, this time addressed to Eli Hallow, from a legal office in the city. Inside, a trust fund, signed by Jack, co-signed by Thomas, and a note that said, you come from nothing and everything. That is the beginning of your strength. There were some papers she avoided, forms she never filled, spaces left blank on purpose. But that week, with Eli stronger and the air around her finally calm, Callie did something she hadn't dared to do before. She filled out her son's birth certificate. She sat at the kitchen table in the guest house, pen in hand, heart thudding like it did the night he was born. Child's name, Eli Hallow. Mother's name, Callie Hallow. She paused at the next line, father's name. She looked out the window. Thomas was tending to the garden, the same one where Eli was born. Jack was due over soon, bringing groceries as he always did now on Sundays. And Jenna, she texted that morning, just a picture of a recipe. Baby steps, the message said. Callie smiled. Then she wrote, father's name, Jack Holloway. Not because he'd earned it overnight, not because he'd done everything right, but because he showed up, in the quiet moments, in the hard ones, in the places where men before him had vanished. And she knew one day Eli would ask about that name. She would tell him the truth, but also the grace. That evening, they all gathered in the main house for dinner. Thomas, Callie, Jack, Jenna, and baby Eli, babbling in his little seat. It wasn't a perfect picture. There were scars, uneven edges, but it was real. Jenna brought dessert. Thomas lit candles. Jack did the dishes. And for the first time, no one felt like a guest. Later, after the others left, Thomas sat with Callie on the back porch. The air was warm, the kind of summer night where even the stars seemed to exhale. "I've been thinking," he said, "about that key, the one your mother left." Callie reached into her pocket. It was always with her. "She never told me what it opened." Thomas smiled softly. "I have an idea." He stood, walked around to the side of the house. Callie followed, barefoot and curious. He opened an old shed, dusty, forgotten. In the back, a door, rusted, locked for years. Thomas turned to her. "I built this for Emily, long before we had money. It was going to be a nursery. She wanted a place near the garden." Callie stepped forward, slipped the red string from her neck, inserted the key. It turned with a quiet click. The door opened. Inside, faded wallpaper, a mobile hanging from the ceiling, a tiny rocking chair, untouched, waiting. Callie covered her mouth. Thomas rested a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe it wasn't meant for her baby," he said. "Maybe it was meant for yours." Tears spilled quietly. Not the kind that burn, but the kind that heal. In that room something settled. Not closure, but peace. Because some stories don't end with weddings or riches. They end with a second cradle, and someone brave enough to fill it. The room had no heat. The wallpaper had faded to the color of old tea. But when Callie stood in the doorway, holding Eli in her arms, she knew this was the room her mother had dreamt of. Not for herself, but for them. She could almost hear the echo of what might have been. A baby's laugh, the creak of a rocking chair, the hum of lullabies never sung. Thomas leaned against the doorframe behind her. "She picked the color," he said. "That soft green. Said it reminded her of eucalyptus and quiet." Callie smiled. She always wanted quiet. Thomas placed a small music box in her hand. "I was going to give this to Emily. Never had the chance." Callie wound it gently. A lullaby drifted out, delicate, cracked in places, but beautiful still. Eli blinked up at her, then, slowly, closed his eyes. And right there, on the worn floor of an unfinished nursery, Callie sat down, rocked her baby. Not in fear, not in shame, but in love. Over the weeks, the cradle was restored. Thomas sanded the old wood. Jenna sewed new linens. Jack brought paint and stayed until sunset, even when no one asked him to. They didn't rush. Healing doesn't hurry. And one day, the cradle was ready. Not grand, but steady. And when Callie laid Eli down for the first time, his hand reached out and touched the edge like he knew. This was his space now. The town never knew the whole story, only that a baby had come and stayed. Some said Thomas Gray had taken in a girl. Others whispered he had a granddaughter now, though no one knew quite how. But the truth didn't belong to gossip. It belonged to the garden, to the woman who gave birth under stars, to the man who lost everything and dared to open his door again, to a family built not by blood, but by mercy. Some nights Callie still sat awake, listening to Eli breathe, remembering who she used to be. But when she looked around the room, she didn't see loss anymore. She saw presence, a letter from her mother in the drawer, a photo of Emily on the shelf, a baby boy wrapped in grace, and above the cradle, in a simple wooden frame, the words, "Thomas carved." Some stories don't end in marriage. They end in a cradle, and two people who finally felt safe enough to sleep. So if this story found its way into your heart, if you've ever felt left out, left behind, or unloved, then let me tell you, sugar, you are worthy, you do belong, and there is still space for your story in this big old world. The light's always on right here on the porch. Come back when you need comfort. There's always room at the second cradle. If this story curled up somewhere inside you, leave a comment below, all right? Miss Martha'll be right here, rockin' and listening.